In a world where everyone seems to have a price, what is integrity actually worth for Lyra Valmont, a 26-year-old waitress drowning in debt and family medical bills that question wasn't a philosophical exercise. It became a choice presented in a thick manila envelope filled with $100,000 in cash. All she had to do was betray a secret she didn't even know she had. She was a pawn in a corporate game she couldn't comprehend, and her refusal, witnessed by a silent old man in the corner booth, wasn't the end of her story. It was the explosive beginning of a test that would either shatter her life or transform it forever. The scent of stale coffee and industrial-grade lemon cleaner was the perfume of Lyra Valmont's life. It clung to her clothes, her hair, and her exhausted spirit. At 26, she moved with the weary grace of someone much older, a ghost haunting the checkered floors of the Gilded Spoon, a mid-tier diner that tried to mask its greasy spoon heart with brass railings and velvet-roped stanchions. It was a place where aspiring actors rehearsed their lines while topping up ketchup bottles, and where dreams went to die a slow, unremarkable death over lukewarm soup of the day. Lyra's own dreams had died a much faster, more violent death 4 years ago. She had been a star student at Georgetown Law, a debater with a razor-sharp mind and a burning desire to fight for the underdog. Then came the phone call, her parents gone in a tangle of steel and shattered glass on a rain-slicked highway. Suddenly she was no longer a student. She was the sole guardian of her 16-year-old brother, Leo. And then came the second blow, Leo's diagnosis. A rare, degenerative neurological condition that required a cocktail of outrageously expensive medications and specialized physical therapy just to keep him mobile. Law school became an impossible luxury. Her inheritance was a mountain of debt, so she traded case law for coffee pots, legal briefs for order pads. Her life became a relentless cycle, a 12-hour shift at the diner, a cross-town bus ride to their cramped 4th-floor walk-up apartment in a neighborhood that had long given up on gentrification, and long nights spent administering Leo's medication, helping him with his exercises, and watching the light in his once bright eyes flicker with frustration. Every dollar was accounted for. Every tip was a tiny victory against the tide of bills that threatened to pull them under. The collection notices were a constant, humming anxiety in the back of her mind. The landlord, Mr. Gable, a man whose smile never reached his eyes, was already making noises about the rent being late again. Just need to get through the month, she'd murmur to herself, refilling a salt shaker. It was her mantra, the prayer of the perpetually struggling. This particular Tuesday was no different. The lunch rush had been brutal. A bus tour of retirees had descended, demanding decaf separate checks and endless patience. Her feet ached a deep throbbing pain that radiated up her legs. Her smile, the one she wore like a shield, felt plastered on brittle and thin. As the chaos subsided, a quiet figure in the corner booth, booth 12, caught her attention. He'd been there for hours, nursing the same cup of black coffee. He was an older gentleman, likely in his late 70s, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored tweed jacket. He had a face etched with the kind of deep lines that spoke of both laughter and immense pressure. He wasn't reading the newspaper in front of him. His sharp grey eyes were scanning the room, observing, assessing. He was utterly still, an island of calm in the diner's sea of low-grade hysteria. Lyra had seen him before, maybe once or twice a month. He never said much, just a quiet coffee black and a polite nod. He tipped well always, a crisp $50 bill, an amount that could cover their groceries for a week. As she cleared a nearby table, she felt his gaze linger on her. It wasn't creepy or untoward, but analytical, like a jeweler examining a stone for flaws. It was unnerving. She gave a small professional smile and retreated to the relative safety of the kitchen. Table 7 is getting antsy. Valmont barked her manager, a sweaty man named Frank, whose primary management tool was intimidation. On it, she said, grabbing the plates. As she returned to the dining room, 2 men in sharp, ill-fitting suits walked in. They oozed a cheap, aggressive confidence. They surveyed the room, their eyes landing on her before they took a booth near the front. They were the kind of men who snapped their fingers for service and saw waitresses as furniture that could talk. Lyra's shoulders tightened. It was going to be one of those tables. She pasted on her smile and walked over. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man with the slicked-back hair, who introduced himself as Mr. Henderson, didn't even look at her. He was busy scrolling on his phone. The other, a heavier man named Mr. Schmidt, gave her a dismissive once-over. "We're actually here to see you." Lyra Henderson said, his voice smooth and condescending. Lyra froze. A cold dread washed over her. Were they debt collectors? Had Mr. Gable sent someone? "I'm sorry, I think you have me mistaken for someone else," she said, her voice tight. "Lyra Valmont. Dropped out of Georgetown Law, top 5% of your class. Currently sole guardian of Leo Valmont. Bills are piling up, aren't they?" Schmidt chimed in, a smug look on his face. The world seemed to tilt. How did they know that she felt exposed, vulnerable? Her heart hammered against her ribs. In the corner of her eye, she could see the old man in booth 12 put down his newspaper. He was watching. The air in the diner suddenly felt thick and heavy, suffocating Lyra. The clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversation faded into a distant roar. All she could hear was the blood pounding in her ears. "Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand holding the order pad was trembling. Mr. Henderson finally looked up from his phone, his eyes cold and predatory. "We're problem solvers, Lyra. And we understand you have a problem, a financial one. We're here to offer a solution." He slid a thick, plain manila envelope across the vinyl tabletop. It landed with a soft, obscene thud. Lyra stared at it, as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't need to see inside to know what it was. The weight of it, the sheer bulk, spoke of a sum of money she couldn't even comprehend. "What is this?" she asked, though she already knew. $100,000, Schmidt said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Cash. Untraceable. A gift, you could say. Enough to clear your debts, get your brother the best specialists, maybe even think about going back to school. Enough to let you breathe again." Lyra's mind reeled. $100,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering like a desert mirage. It was an escape hatch from the crushing pressure of her life. It was the best doctors for Leo. It was a new apartment, one with an elevator. It was the end of the constant gnawing fear. An image of Leo flashed in her mind, his brave smile as he struggled through another painful physical therapy session. This money could change his life. Her gaze flickered towards the envelope. For a split second, she allowed herself to imagine it. The relief, the freedom. Then the cold reality of the situation crashed back in. "No one gives away that kind of money for free," she said, her voice regaining a sliver of its strength. "What do you want?" Henderson leaned back, a smug smile playing on his lips. He enjoyed this part. "It's simple. We work for a competitor of a certain investment firm, a very large, very powerful firm. We know that one of their senior executives, a man named Dominic Russo, has a quiet lunch meeting here every Wednesday. Same time, same booth." Lyra's mind raced. She'd seen Mr. Russo, a stern, impeccably dressed man who always ordered the Cobb salad with the dressing on the side and spoke into his phone in hushed, urgent tones. He was just another customer. "He's finalizing the details of a major acquisition," Henderson continued, his voice dropping lower. "A company called Aura Tech. The deal is still confidential, but it's going to make a lot of people very, very rich. We just need to know the final purchase price per share he authorizes. That's it." He made it sound so simple, so trivial. "You want me to eavesdrop?" Lyra asked, incredulous. "Not at all," Schmidt corrected her smoothly. "We have a device. Tiny. You just need to stick it to the underside of his regular table before he arrives. It's activated remotely. You do that, the information is ours, and this money is yours. He'll never know. You'll never see us again." He slid a tiny black disc, no bigger than a button, across the table. Lyra looked from the disc to the envelope. Her training in law, the ethics and principles that had been drilled into her, screamed in protest. This was corporate espionage. It was illegal. It was wrong. But then she thought of the eviction notice tucked under a magnet on her fridge. She thought of the pharmacist's apologetic face as he told her Leo's new prescription wasn't covered by their threadbare insurance plan. The world wasn't black and white. It was 1,000 shades of desperate grey. Her internal battle was a silent, raging storm. Every instinct for survival, every ounce of love for her brother, urged her to take the money. What was one rich man's secret compared to Leo's well-being, in a world that had dealt her such a cruel hand? Didn't she deserve one shortcut? She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting around the diner. Most people were lost in their own worlds. Frank was yelling at a line cook in the kitchen, but the old man in booth 12 was still watching. His gaze wasn't judgmental, just present. It was as if he was a silent witness to a defining moment of her life. His quiet presence anchored her, pulling her back from the precipice. She thought about her parents. They hadn't had much, but they had their integrity. They had taught her that the only thing a person truly owned, the one thing that could never be taken unless you gave it away, was your character. What would Leo think of her if he knew she had stooped to this? She was his guardian, his moral compass. If she compromised, what was she teaching him? Her resolve hardened. The storm inside her subsided, leaving a cold, clear certainty. She met Henderson's gaze, her own eyes now steady and defiant. No. The word was quiet, but it filled the space between them with unshakable finality. Henderson's smile faltered. "I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted, her voice gaining power. "You want to pay me to commit a crime. You want to buy a piece of my soul. And the answer is no." She pushed the envelope and the small device back across the table. Her hand was steady now. Schmidt scoffed. "Don't be a fool. Think about your brother. This is a victimless crime, a rounding error for these people. The victim would be me." Lyra said, her voice ringing with a conviction she hadn't felt in years. "Now I'd like you to leave, or I'll call the police." For a moment, the two men just stared at her, their expressions a mixture of shock and contempt. They had been so certain. They believed everyone had a price, and they were experts at finding it. Lyra's refusal wasn't just a rejection of their offer. It was a rejection of their entire worldview. Henderson slowly stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. He snatched the envelope and the device from the table. "You're making a huge mistake, little girl. You'll regret this. The only thing I would regret is saying yes," she replied, standing her ground. Without another word, they turned and stalked out of the diner, the bell on the door chiming mockingly behind them. Lyra stood there for a long moment, her body trembling with adrenaline. She felt dizzy, sick, but also clean. For the first time in a long time, She hadn't made a choice based on desperation. She had made a choice based on who she was. She finally allowed herself to exhale a long, shuddering breath. Her eyes drifted to booth 12. The old man met her gaze. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then he placed $100 bill on his table, stood up, and walked out, his newspaper tucked under his arm. Lyra watched him go, a strange feeling settling in her chest. She had no idea that the quiet test she had just passed was only a prelude to a much larger one. The rest of the day passed in a blur of mundane tasks that felt surreal after the morning's encounter. Lyra served burgers, refilled coffees, and wiped down sticky tables, all while the scene with Henderson and Schmidt played on a loop in her mind. Had she been a fool, the rational part of her brain screamed that she had just thrown away a lifeline. $100,000. The phrase echoed with the weight of her lost opportunities. She could almost feel the phantom texture of the cash, the crispness of the bills that could have solved everything. When her shift ended, she walked home under a sky, the color of a bruise, the city lights feeling harsh and accusatory. The familiar climb up the 4 flights of stairs to her apartment felt heavier than usual, each step a reminder of the life she had chosen to continue living. She found Leo at the small kitchen table, diligently trying to complete a puzzle with hands that didn't always obey his commands. His face pale and thin, lit up when he saw her. "Hey, Lee," he said, his voice soft. "Rough day?" "The usual," she lied, forcing a smile as she kissed the top of his head. She could never tell him what happened. The burden was hers alone to carry. That night, sleep offered little escape. She dreamt of drowning in a sea of red-inked bills, the faces of Henderson and Schmidt, mocking her from the shore. The next morning she awoke feeling hollowed out. She was getting Leo his breakfast when a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from their front door. Her heart leapt into her throat. It was too early for Mr. Gable. It had to be them. Henderson and Schmidt, back to threaten her, to make her regret her decision. "Stay here," she whispered to Leo, her body tense. She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. A man in a simple black suit stood in the hallway. He wasn't a thug. He was a professional with a neatly trimmed beard and an earpiece. Parked at the curb below was a sleek black sedan, the kind that whispered of silent, effortless power. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" The man didn't smile. "Miss Lyra Valmont?" "Yes. My name is Robert. I've been sent by Mr. Hallberg. He requests your presence at his office at your earliest convenience." The name meant nothing to her. "Hallberg? I don't know any Mr. Hallberg. He was at the Gilded Spoon yesterday. Booth 12 inches, Robert said, his expression unchanging. The old man, the man with the newspaper and the watchful eyes. A chill snaked down Lyra's spine. How did he find her? What did he want? Was he connected to Henderson and Schmidt? "What is this about?" she asked, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "Mr. Hallberg prefers to discuss his business in person. The car is waiting." This was insane. A stranger, a mysterious old man from the diner, was summoning her via a private driver to an unknown location. Every alarm bell in her head was ringing. But her curiosity, and a strange, unexplainable feeling that this was connected to the events of yesterday, was stronger than her fear. This man had witnessed her choice. Maybe he was here to offer a different one. I can't just leave," she stammered, thinking of Leo. "Arrangements can be made for your brother's care for the day if you wish," Robert said, as if anticipating her every objection. The offer was both considerate and deeply unsettling. They had clearly done their research. Her mind raced. This felt bigger than she could possibly imagine. Refusing seemed more dangerous than accepting. "Give me 15 minutes, she said. She quickly explained to Leo that a work opportunity had come up, and a trusted neighbor would stay with him. She ignored his worried questions, threw on the one clean professional blouse she owned, and tried to tame her hair into something resembling order. Staring at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, she saw a tired, frightened young woman. "Get it together, Valmont," she whispered to the reflection of the determined law student she used to be. Downstairs, Robert held the car door open for her. The interior was silent and smelled of rich leather. As the car pulled away from her dilapidated building and merged into the city's traffic, Lyra felt like she was crossing a threshold into another world. They drove towards the financial district, the buildings growing taller and more imposing, gleaming towers of glass and steel that scraped the sky. The car finally glided to a stop in front of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. The words Hallberg Enterprises were carved in elegant, understated letters above the grand entrance. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just some wealthy old man. This was a titan of industry. A quick search on her phone would have told her that Corvin Holberg was a legendary, almost mythical figure in the world of finance, a billionaire known for his ruthless business acumen and his intensely private life. Robert escorted her through a lobby of polished marble and soaring ceilings, past a security desk where guards nodded respectfully. They didn't ask for her name. They were expecting her. They rode a private elevator, its ascent so smooth and silent, it felt like they weren't moving at all. The doors opened directly into a reception area of breathtaking minimalism. A single receptionist sat behind a desk that looked like a piece of modern sculpture. "Miss Valmont," the receptionist said with a polite smile. "Mr. Hallberg will see you now." She led Lyra down a wide, silent hallway, lined with museum-quality art, to a pair of massive mahogany doors. She knocked once, then opened them. "Miss Valmont is here, sir." Lyra stepped inside, and her world tilted once more. The office was less a room and more a kingdom. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window, offering a godlike view of the city sprawling below. The furniture was sparse, but substantial. A massive desk carved from a single piece of dark wood leather chairs that looked impossibly comfortable, and shelves filled not with trophies, but with leather-bound books. The air was still and smelled of old paper, lemon oil, and power. And there, sitting behind the desk, was the man from booth 12. He was no longer a quiet, unassuming old man. In this context, his simple tweed jacket looked like the chosen attire of a king who had no need for a crown. His grey eyes, the ones that had watched her so intently, were just as sharp, but now they held an undeniable authority. This was Corvin Holberg. "Miss Valmont," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. It was calm, but it commanded attention. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to one of the chairs opposite his desk. Lyra walked forward, her worn-out flats silent on the plush Persian rug. She sat on the edge of the chair, her back ramrod straight, her purse clutched in her lap like a life raft. For a long moment, he simply studied her, his expression unreadable. Lyra met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. She had faced down Henderson and Schmidt. She could face an old man, no matter how rich he was. "Tea, coffee?" he asked. "No, thank you, sir," she replied, her voice steady. "With all due respect, why am I here?" A faint smile touched his lips. Direct. "I appreciate that. You're here because of what I witnessed yesterday at the Gilded Spoon." Lyra's guard went up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, Miss Valmont," he said, holding up a hand. "Let's not waste time with pretense. I saw the entire exchange with Mr. Henderson and Mr. Schmidt. I saw the envelope. I heard their offer. And I heard your response." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. $100,000 is a significant sum of money, especially for someone in your position. I took the liberty of looking into your circumstances, the debts left by your parents, your brother's medical needs. It is, to put it mildly, a desperate situation. You had every reason to take that money, every logical, practical reason, but you didn't. I need to know why. The question was simple, but the answer was the core of her entire being. It was wrong, she said. The money wasn't worth the cost. What cost? He pressed, leaning forward slightly. Your self-respect, your principles. These are abstract concepts, Miss Valmont. Your brother's health is not abstract. An eviction notice is not abstract. My principles are the only thing I have left that are truly mine, she countered, her voice gaining passion. They're what my parents taught me. They're what I need to be able to look my brother in the eye. If I sell them, then I have nothing. That money would have been a poison that solved one problem while creating a much bigger one. Corvin Hallberg leaned back in his chair, a look of profound contemplation on his face. He seemed to be seeing her not just as a waitress, but as a person, a puzzle he was trying to solve. For 40 years, he said, his voice becoming more personal, I have built this company. I have dealt with liars, cheats, and sycophants. I have seen men and women sell their loyalty for a fraction of what you were offered. They do it for a promotion, for a corner office, for a minor advantage over a colleague. They are smart, educated people from the best schools, and their integrity is as thin as onion skin. He picked up a heavy crystal paperweight from his desk, turning it over in his hands. Character, Miss Valmont. That is the rarest commodity in this world. Far more valuable than gold or oil. It cannot be bought, and it is almost impossible to find. People think I built this empire on shrewd investments and market timing. I didn't. I built it on finding the one or two people in a generation I could truly trust. He set the paperweight down with a soft thud and looked directly at her. Now for the real reason you are here. He took a deep breath. Mr. Henderson and Mr. Schmidt, they work for me. The blood drained from Lyra's face. She felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. What? They are part of my internal security and acquisitions team, Corvin explained calmly. The scenario they presented to you was a fabrication, a test. The Auratech deal is real, and Dominic Russo is indeed one of my executives. But the competitor was me. The bribe was from me. Lyra stared at him, speechless. The audacity of it was staggering. He had orchestrated the entire thing. He had dangled her deepest desires in front of her, just to see what she would do. A wave of indignation washed over her. You played me, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of shock and anger. You put me in an impossible position, manipulated my circumstances. For what? For some kind of game. Not a game, Corvin corrected her, his tone sharp. A recruitment tool, the most important one I have. I cannot afford to have people in my inner circle whose loyalty is for sale. An interview tells me what a person wants me to think. A resume tells me where they've been. A test like this, it tells me who they are when they think no one of consequence is watching. He stood up and walked to the vast window, looking out at the city he seemingly owned. I am an old man, Miss Valmont. I have no children, no family to whom I can entrust this company. My current executives are capable, but they are products of the system. I despise a system that values profit over principle. I am looking for a successor. Not just a CEO, but a partner. Someone to safeguard the legacy of this firm, to lead it with a moral compass as true as its financial one. He turned back to face her, his grey eyes piercing her to the core. Yesterday in a greasy spoon diner, A young woman with the weight of the world on her shoulders was offered an easy way out. She was offered 100,000 reasons to compromise her integrity, and she refused. He walked back to his desk and stood before her. "You passed the test, Lyra. Now the real interview begins." Lyra sat frozen in the leather chair, her mind struggling to process the sheer magnitude of what was happening. The anger at being manipulated was still there, a hot coal in her chest, but it was being rapidly overshadowed by a bewildering sense of disbelief. A test, a recruitment tool, a partner. The words spun in her head, nonsensical and terrifyingly real. "A partner," she finally managed to say the words, feeling foreign on her tongue. "Mr. Hallberg, I'm a waitress. I serve coffee and clean up spilled milk. I haven't seen the inside of a law library in 4 years. I am not qualified to be your partner." "You are mistaken," Corvin said, resuming his seat. "Your resume says you're a waitress. Your character says you're an iron-willed strategist who can't be bought. I can teach you finance. I can re-enroll you in the best law school in the country and pay for it out of petty cash. I can give you a team of analysts who can build a valuation model in their sleep. What I cannot teach is what you demonstrated yesterday. That is innate." He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a slim leather-bound folder. He slid it across the desk to her. "This is not a job offer, Miss Valmont. A job implies you work for me. This is a proposal for a partnership track. It starts with a position as my personal apprentice, a special advisor to the chairman. The salary will be enough to immediately resolve all your personal financial issues and provide the absolute best medical care for your brother. You will have a car, an apartment, and a budget for a new wardrobe." Lyra stared at the folder, her hands hovering over it, afraid to touch it, as if it might burn her. "The track is 5 years," Corvin continued. "You will learn every facet of this business, from acquisitions to risk management to global strategy. You will sit in on every major meeting. You will have my ear and you will have my trust, something no one else in this building has in its entirety. At the end of those 5 years, if you have proven as capable as I believe you are, you will be named Executive Vice Chair with a significant equity stake in Hallberg Enterprises." It was a fairy tale, a ridiculous, impossible fantasy spun by a lonely, eccentric billionaire. It couldn't be real. "Why?" she asked, her voice filled with suspicion. "Why me? You could have your pick of the brightest minds from Harvard or Wharton. Why a waitress from the Gilded Spoon? Because the brightest minds from Harvard and Wharton have been taught how to game the system, how to maximize profit at any cost. Their integrity has been compromised 1,000 times in small ways before they even walk in the door," he said with a sigh. "I'm not looking for the next Wolf of Wall Street. I'm looking for a shepherd. I saw one yesterday." He gestured to the folder. "Read the proposal. Take your time. My driver will take you home whenever you are ready." With trembling fingers, Lyra opened the folder. The numbers on the page made her dizzy. The salary was more than she could have made in 20 years at the diner. The benefits package included a comprehensive health plan that would cover every one of Leo's needs without question. It was everything she had ever prayed for handed to her on a silver platter. But there had to be a catch. There was always a catch. As if reading her mind, Corvin spoke again. "This is not a gift, Miss Valmont. It will be the hardest thing you have ever done. Most of my senior staff will resent you. They will see you as an interloper, a curiosity. They will test you, they will undermine you, and they will wait for you to fail. You will have to earn their respect, and that is a currency harder to come by than money." He paused, his expression hardening. "And your first assignment will be your first test. He pointed to a stack of files on the corner of his desk. "That is the complete due diligence file on the Aura Tech acquisition, the deal Henderson and Schmidt invented for their story. As it happens, it is very real. My team, led by Dominic Russo, has given it their seal of approval. They are urging me to sign the final papers by the end of the week. The purchase price is $900 million. Lyra's eyes widened. 900 million. The number was abstract, astronomical. "Your first task, as my advisor," Corvin said, his voice dropping to a serious, deliberate tone, "is to review that entire file. You will read every page, every footnote, every projection. You have 48 hours. I want you to look at it with the same eyes you had yesterday in that diner. The eyes of someone who understands that things are not always what they seem, that people will lie and cheat to get what they want. I want you to find the flaw that my multi-million-dollar team of experts has missed." There it was, the catch. It wasn't just a job. It was an impossible task designed to make her fail. He was setting her up against his own senior executive, a man named Dominic Russo, the very man she was supposed to spy on in the fabricated scenario. The irony was thick and suffocating. "And if I find nothing," she asked, "then you will tell me that, and I will likely sign the deal. Your opinion, even at this early stage, matters." "And if I refuse the position?" Corvin Hallberg leaned back, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Then my driver will take you home. You'll be given a severance of $100,000 for your time and for the unpleasantness of yesterday's test. You can walk away, solve your immediate problems, and we will never speak again." He was offering her the bribe again, only this time it was legitimate. He was giving her a choice: take the easy money and run, or accept the impossible challenge and step into a world she couldn't begin to imagine. It was the same test as yesterday, just on a grander scale. Lyra looked at the offer in her lap, then at the mountain of files on the desk. She thought of Leo, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope, not just for his survival, but for his future. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a chance to fight a chance to use the mind she had been forced to neglect for so long. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. She closed the folder and placed it gently on the desk. She stood up and looked Corvin Hallberg straight in the eye. "I won't need 48 hours, she said, the ghost of the Georgetown law student stirring within her. "And I don't need a new apartment or a car, just a pot of very strong coffee and access to your company's financial databases. Where do I start?" A slow, genuine smile spread across Corvin Hallberg's face for the first time. It transformed his severe features, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the legend. "Excellent," he said. "Robert will show you to the temporary office next door. Welcome to Hallberg Enterprises, Miss Valmont." The temporary office was larger than her entire apartment, with the same stunning view as Corvin's. A sleek, powerful computer was already humming on the desk, and the mountain of files on the Aura Tech deal had been wheeled in on a cart. Lyra took off her worn cardigan, hung it on the back of the high-tech ergonomic chair, and for a moment felt like an imposter in a costume. Then she opened the first file. The world of corporate finance was a foreign language. EBITDA, synergistic leveraging, GAAP compliance, mezzanine financing, the jargon was dense and deliberately obtuse. The first few hours were a grueling slog. She read and reread sentences, her old legal training kicking in, as she forced herself to understand the precise meaning of every clause and definition. Late in the afternoon, there was a sharp knock on the door. A man in his late 40s with silvering temples and an air of supreme self-confidence entered without waiting for an answer. He was flanked by two younger associates, who looked like carbon copies of each other. "So you're the one," the man said, his voice laced with condescension. He didn't bother to introduce himself, but Lyra knew instantly. This was Dominic Russo. The boss's pet project. The Waitress. Lyra stood up, refusing to be looked down upon. "My name is Lyra Valmont." Russo circled her desk, his eyes flicking over the files she had spread out. "I hear you're reviewing my team's work on the Aura Tech deal. Let me save you some time. It's flawless. We've spent 6 months on this. My people are the best in the business. Whatever Corvin thinks you're going to find, you won't. You're out of your depth." "I'll be the judge of that, Mr. Russo," Lyra replied, her voice cool and even. Russo let out a short, humorless laugh. "Good luck with that. Just try not to get any ketchup stains on the balance sheets." He turned and swept out of the room, his acolytes trailing in his wake. The encounter left her shaken, but also strangely energized. Russo's arrogance was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down. He and his team saw her as a joke. Good. Let them underestimate her. Lyra pushed aside the executive summaries and the glossy projections. Those were marketing documents designed to sell the deal. The truth, if it existed, would be buried deep in the boring, tedious data. She pulled up the raw financial statements, the quarterly reports going back 5 years, the footnotes in the appendices that most people ignored. She worked through the night. The city lights outside her window blurred into a glittering tapestry. She drank pot after pot of coffee, her mind sharpening to a fine point. She wasn't a finance expert, so she couldn't look at the numbers like one. Instead, she looked at them like a lawyer searching for a discrepancy in testimony. She wasn't looking for a mathematical error. She was looking for a flaw in the story the numbers were trying to tell. Around 3 a.m., she found it. It was small, a footnote on page 278 of a third-quarter report from 2 years ago. It mentioned a newly formed subsidiary, Aura Innovations, LLC, registered in Delaware. It was described as a holding company for intellectual property patents. Standard stuff. But something about the phrasing nagged at her. She cross-referenced the subsidiary. It appeared again and again, but always in the footnotes. The assets it held were valued at a modest $2 million initially, but in subsequent reports that valuation grew exponentially. 5 million, 20 million, 100 million. The growth was staggering, and it was the primary driver of Auratech's overall increase in asset valuation, the very thing that made it such an attractive acquisition target. But what was Aura Innovations, LLC? What patents did it hold? The due diligence file from Russo's team accepted the valuation at face value, citing an independent appraisal. Lyra wasn't satisfied. Using the high-level access Corvin had given her, she started digging into the public registration documents for the LLC. Her heart began to beat faster. The registered agent for Aura Innovations was a law firm she'd never heard of. The physical address was a P.O. box in Wilmington. Then she started searching for the so-called independent appraiser, a firm called Veritas Valuations. It didn't exist. There was no website, no registration, no record of it anywhere except in the Auratech reports. It was a ghost. This was the loose thread. With a surge of adrenaline, she started pulling at it. She cross-referenced the names of Auratech's board members with the registered agents of the law firm. Nothing. She was about to give up when a new idea struck her. She ran a search on the board member's immediate family, and there it was. A bingo. The sole partner of the phantom law firm was a man named Philip Lantry. And Philip Lantry was the brother-in-law of Auratech's chief financial officer. It was a classic shell game. The CFO had created a fake subsidiary, assigned it a portfolio of worthless or non-existent patents, and then used a fake appraisal firm run by a family member to artificially inflate its value year after year. This single fraudulent entity accounted for almost 40% of Auratech's stated asset worth. Russo's team, in their haste and arrogance, had relied on the independent appraisal and never bothered to dig deeper. They had missed it completely. Halberg Enterprises wasn't about to pay $900 million for a promising tech company. They were about to pay nearly $1 billion for a company that was cooking its books, with almost half of its value being a complete fabrication. Lyra leaned back in her chair, her body trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. She looked at the clock. It was 5:17 a.m. She had been at it for nearly 20 hours straight. She picked up the phone on her desk and dialed Corvin Halberg's private line, the one he had told her to use any time, day or night. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert. "Halberg." "Mr. Halberg," she said, her own voice hoarse with fatigue. "It's Lyra. I found it. Auratech is a house of cards." An emergency board meeting was called for 10 a.m. The atmosphere in the main boardroom was electric with tension. Dominic Russo and his team sat on one side of the long, polished table, looking annoyed and inconvenienced. They whispered among themselves, shooting dismissive glances towards Lyra, who sat alone on the other side, a simple laptop and a single folder in front of her. Corvin Halberg sat at the head of the table, his face an impassive mask, observing everyone. "Dominic," Corvin began, his voice calm. "You and your team have assured me for months that the Auratech acquisition is a sound strategic move. You've signed off on all due diligence. Is that correct?" "Absolutely, Corvin," Russo said with breezy confidence. "It's a slam dunk. The numbers are solid. Their IP portfolio alone is worth the price of admission." "Is that so?" Corvin said, his eyes flicking to Lyra. "Miss Valmont, you have a dissenting opinion, I believe." All eyes in the room swiveled to her. It was the moment of truth. This was her one shot to prove she belonged here. She took a steadying breath. "Mr. Russo is correct that Auratech's IP portfolio is worth the price of admission." She began, her voice clear and strong, resonating in the silent room. "The problem is, the price of admission is practically zero, because the portfolio as valued doesn't exist." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Russo scoffed loudly. "That's a preposterous accusation," he snapped. "We have a certified independent appraisal from Veritas Valuations that confirms Veritas Valuations is a shell company registered to a P.O. box in Delaware." Lyra cut in smoothly, never taking her eyes off him. "It has no employees, no website, and no business history. Furthermore, the holding company for the IP Aura Innovations LLC is a fraudulent entity created by Auratech's CFO Daniel Cobb. Its assets have been systematically and fraudulently inflated over the past 3 years." She stood up and turned on the projector, her presentation appearing on the large screen behind her. For the next 20 minutes, she laid out her findings with the cold, irrefutable logic of a prosecutor giving a closing argument. She displayed the registration documents, the family connections, the timeline of the inflated valuations. She presented a revised balance sheet with the fraudulent assets stripped out, revealing Auratech's true, much lower value. She had dismantled Russo's 6 months of work in less than a day. When she finished, there was a stunned silence in the room. Russo's face was pale, his confidence shattered. His team members avoided his gaze, furiously scrolling through their own tablets, belatedly trying to verify her claims. "The flaw," Lyra concluded, looking directly at the board members, "wasn't in the math, it was in the trust. Mr. Russo's team trusted a piece of paper, a fraudulent appraisal, more than they trusted their own instincts to question something that seemed too good to be true. They were sold a story, and they never bothered to read the fine print." She sat down, her heart pounding. She had done it. Corvin Hallberg let the silence hang in the air for a full minute before he spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of a final judgment. "Dominic," he said, his eyes fixed on the defeated executive, "you and your team are suspended pending a full internal review. Clean out your desks." Russo looked like he had been struck. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He simply nodded a broken man and gestured for his team to follow him out of the room. When the door closed behind them, Corvin turned his attention to the rest of the board. "Miss Valmont has just saved this company $900 million. More than that, she has saved us from the humiliation and legal fallout of acquiring a fraudulent company. She did this not with a degree from Wharton, but with tenacity, intelligence, and an unwillingness to accept things at face value, qualities that have, I'm afraid, become all too rare in this building." He stood up and walked over to Lyra's side of the table. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the room, "I am officially withdrawing my previous retirement plans. Instead, I will be staying on as executive chairman, and I would like you to be the first to welcome the new president and chief operating officer of Hallberg Enterprises and my partner, Miss Lyra Valmont." Gasps echoed around the room. It was an unprecedented leap from apprentice to president in a single day. But no one argued. They had all just witnessed exactly why she deserved it. Lyra looked up at Corvin, her eyes wide with shock. This was more than she could have ever imagined. Later that day, after a whirlwind of introductions and paperwork, she stood with Corvin in his office, looking out at the city. "President and COO," she said, still reeling. "I thought this was a 5-year track." "You learn fast," Corvin said with a rare, warm smile. "And I don't have 5 years to waste. The company needs you now." Her first act as president of Hallberg Enterprises was to make a phone call. She arranged for Leo to be admitted to the finest neurological institute in the country, with a team of the world's best doctors assigned to his case. She didn't ask about the cost. She didn't have to. That evening, she didn't take the company car. She took the bus back to her old neighborhood, the familiar route feeling like a journey from a past life. She walked up the 4 flights of stairs for the last time. She found Leo at the table just as she always did. She sat down beside him, her heart overflowing. "Leo," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Things are going to be different now. Everything is going to be okay." He looked at her at the exhaustion and stress that had been etched on her face, for years now replaced by a quiet, powerful light. He didn't know the details, but he could see the truth in her eyes. He smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile she hadn't seen in a very long time. Lyra Valmont, the waitress from the Gilded Spoon, was finally home. But her journey, the one forged by integrity in the face of desperation, was just beginning. Lyra's story isn't a fairy tale about a waitress who got lucky. It's a powerful testament to the idea that our character is our true currency. In a moment where she had nothing to lose but her own integrity, she chose to hold on to it, and that single decision became the foundation of a new life. Her journey from the Gilded Spoon to the boardroom wasn't about the money or the title. It was about proving that a moral compass is the most powerful tool in any negotiation, whether it's for a $100,000 bribe or a $1 billion deal. Her story reminds us that the choices we make when we think no one is watching are the ones that truly define us. They are the tests that shape our destiny. What did you think of Lyra's incredible journey? Have you ever faced a moment where your integrity was put to the test? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved, you please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of incredible people.